Okay, there. That should be better. So I'm just going to wait just for a moment here to. Okay, there. All right, you'll have to forgive me. Usually John's the one who runs this thing, and I usually Skype into him, so there's a little bit of a learning curve for me tonight. But hopefully I can still make it a entertaining show. So, uh, everyone, Jerome, you missed my introduction. Anybody else who's watching missed my introduction? Welcome to Men Without a Nation. You can find us over on Instagram, over at blogspot.com. We don't really go on Twitter anymore. Of course, the YouTube channel, and yeah, we're John's work schedule changed a little bit, so it's just me tonight. And Jerome, who is in the chat, happened to uh, give me a good topic for tonight to cover, which is what does the Bible say about the shape of the Earth and space and stuff like that. And I hope that the the way that I'm addressing this is a little bit different than you might expect, and I hope it doesn't disappoint. So before we get started here, I always like to start with Scripture. Whoops, don't want that. Or at least bring it back to Scripture, right? Okay, let's see here. So, Proverbs 3, verse 5. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and turn away from evil. Let's find another passage here. Alrighty. Yeah, 1 Corinthians 1, verse 25. For the foolishness of God is wiser than human wisdom, and the weakness of God is stronger than human strength. These are some good things to bear in mind when we're addressing this subject. We live in a very interesting time where people value scientific explanations, where people view what is true to be different than necessarily, we view the truth differently necessarily than other people did in the past. We view truth mostly in terms of empirical evidence, measurable quantities, stuff like that. Yep, Jerome, you got it right, man. Definitely all the truth in there, dude. So when this topic of, what does the Bible say about the earth? What does the Bible say about the universe? What does the Bible say about all these things? We can look at what the Bible says, and we can look up all the Bible verses that have some sort of a reference to the earth in some way, shape, or form. And that is a lot of what the modern resurgence of flat earth, at least from the Christian perspective, is about. There's more than a few Christians um, who are subscribers to the flat earth, the idea of the flat earth. And they have a lot of Bible passages that back them up. And so this website here, it's called Flat Earth Science and Bible. Flat Earth Science and the Bible. Flat Earth Science and Bible.com. I just did a quick web search for this. And this is from a couple years ago, yeah, almost 3 years ago. So this has been going on for a long time. But one of the gentlemen that's really big into this, Rob Skiba, he has. I've listened to many hours um, of his work. I think that he's pretty smart. He definitely looks into things very thoroughly. I also tend to think that his approach can be slipshod, and part of it has to do with um, part of it has to do. Part of that opinion comes from how he's handled the topic of, uh, flat Earth for one thing. He's handled the topic of he's a Hebrew roots uh, adherent. Um, if anyone's familiar with that, we'll probably do a stream on that at some point. But there's plenty of other people that have gone into great detail, sort of debunking that. But he uses the same approach to that as he does to flat Earth, which is or the Earth cosmology. You know, that's not to say that he's wrong about the cosmology. Um, there's a lot of interesting evidence out there that points to at least the fact that we can't really tell what the shape of the Earth is. Um, yeah, that's good. Okay, hold up. Good. Yeah. So, so much more reason to believe Scripture than NASA, but I know in the end, we never know such things. But hey, I can still wonder. Absolutely. Um, I don't trust NASA at all, to be perfectly honest. Um, but not trusting them doesn't necessarily, just not believing them doesn't necessarily mean that the opposite is true. It could be a third option. Um, with all honesty, yeah, I'm still wondering, but it's at the end of the day, I don't think there's any way to prove it one way or the other. I firmly believe that we can't actually go to space. Now, whether or not that's because there is this thing called the firmament, um, this solid barrier between our atmosphere and beyond, and we're contained in a fishbowl, um, or because our technology just won't work past a certain point, i.e., like the Van Allen radiation belts would just fry everything. And there's just no way for us to ever possibly go that far. Um, so you can look through Rob Skiba's stuff, and he'll tie in stuff from all over the Bible. But let's just go through some of these passages that are used to show us that people use as proof of the flat Earth. Okay, so Job 9 verse 8, which alone. So this is scriptures concerning nature of the heavens, sky above, and their relationship to the earth. Which alone spreadeth out the heavens and treadeth upon the waves of the sea. Uh, He spread out the sky which is strong, and as molten hast thou with him spread out the sky which is strong, and as molten looking glass. Um, Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, let it divide the waters from the waters. God made the firmament, and it divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament, and it was so. And God called the firmament heaven. Um, Psalms, heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. Um, if you look into that one, that's actually on one of the original founders of NASA, one of his headstone, and so that kind of leads you to believe leads you to believe that there is actually maybe something physically there, but who knows? Um, believe that the highest that humans have actually gone is low Earth orbit, which I'm assuming is right before. I tend to agree with you. I don't think that we have actually. I don't think that we've been to the moon. I don't think that all of. Um, I don't think that we have sent probes out. I think that everything that's from space, so-called, is artwork. The reason I think that is because of a man named Math Powerland. And I don't know. Um, let's see here. Oh, hey, he's on Instagram. I'll have to add him. Um, he's a hyper realist, an abstract surrealist. And so he has the ability to draw hyper real paintings. I've listened to, if you look search on YouTube for him, you will find a couple of stand up comedy shows where he's actually sitting down. And he's he's taken the audience through these slides. Yeah, I know, right? That's a trustworthy name. Um, obviously, that's probably not his real name. The dude's a Canadian, if that means anything. I've been told that Canadians are rather untrustworthy, but I've never really talked to any. The only person I know from Canada is my uncle, but he's not even a citizen. He just has a green card up there. Anyways, um, that's not true. I know a couple other people, but yeah, Canada is just Canada. But so he has this presentation that he's doing, and he's showing people pictures of photos and paintings, and he asks them, "Is this a photo or is this a painting? Is this a photo or is this a painting?" And by the end of it, his entire purpose for that is to get people to see that you can't trust your own eyes when it comes to being able to tell the difference between a photo and a painting. Makes me trust him less. Yeah, well, no. He lives in the United States with a green card in California. So, I don't know. But he has made the claim that he used to work for NASA in the art department. And he would do photorealistic paintings of things. And let's see here. Let's see if I can get a picture of his. Let's see here. Photo or painting. Earth. He made a shirt that he had printed up. It was, with the question photo or painting on it, and it looks like it's a photo of. It looks like the blue marble picture, and he basically said, but he painted that picture, and so you have the question photo or painting. Someone says, "Oh, it's a photo." It's like, actually, it's a painting, and I know the person who painted it. The whole point is that, I mean, let's just look at some pictures here. Blue marble. Is that a photo or is that a painting? I don't know. I can't tell. It looks photoshopped to me. Let's see here. Is this a photo or is it a painting? Don't know. This is artwork. I know that. Let's take a look at Jupiter here. Okay, this is supposedly Jupiter. You know what else that looks like? It looks like a marble floor. It looks exactly like marbling on like marble tile. And apparently this storm has never moved. You can look at pictures. Oh, one guy made a picture. Let's see here. Oh, yeah. So apparently, this one right here, the title here is UK Amateur Recreates Great Red Spots Glory Days. So, apparently, you know, people used to be able to see it in 1890 with a telescope, and, now it looks like that. And I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Um, Clear some of that out. So the point of all that is, well, absolutely. Yeah, we definitely have the skill. And so, one good YouTube channel. He's a Christian. I trust him with a lot of. I trust him. He seems to have a pretty solid basis. Truth is stranger than fiction. Um, so he does a lot of interesting stuff. And one of the videos that he did sticks in my mind is that they're talking about how they do artwork for new planets that they discover, and essentially, what they get from the telescope is a few pixels of information that isn't even the shape of the planet. It has to do with background radiation and light refraction and stuff like that. And then they have to take that and turn that into a planet somehow to inspire the imagination of the people. Um, you look at other stuff like they're talking about you know um, I forget the name of the documentary, but it was a guy who basically went out to prove that we went to the moon. Um, and he that's the one where Owen has the clip on his stream about oh well we destroyed that technology. It's painful to build back. It's from that same documentary where they're talking about talking to people about well the pictures of the Earth. Well, it's photo, and they say, well, it's Photoshop. It has to be, and it's like, well, because the satellite images, there's like these strips of pictures, and then they have to be stitched together with Photoshop to form a sphere. Okay, let's see here. Google Maps. All right, let's just go to Google Maps real quick here. Now, I don't think that you can see it. I don't think you can see it in the regular Google Maps. It may have to be in Google Earth. Oh, come on. Oh, here we are. And satellite. So, here we are. This is supposedly what our Earth looks like. And you get down here. Oh, why can't you spin it more? Oh, oh, whoops. You can't spin it. You can only spin it east to west. Why is that? Let's zoom in on Antarctica. And and look at this. You see like how there's like these angular pieces that come together. Here's like a radius of a circle. You can kind of see these stitched together lines. It comes together in a pie shape on the bottom. Do you know where it doesn't do that? North Pole. Is this the North Pole? Oh gosh, I got it all spun up around. Okay, there's... Alright, up here in the Arctic. Guess what? It's not stitched together like that. So, what's up with that? Do we not have satellites that can go over the South Pole? Um, You know, this is just like the graphics questions. So anybody who's looked into flat Earth for more than a few hours knows all this stuff. But let's get back to the Bible here, and you know, ultimately, okay. So let's see here. This is another good one from Isaiah that they cite a lot. Um, it is he that sitteth upon the circle of heaven, and the inhabitants thereof are as grasshoppers that stretcheth out the heavens as a curtain, and spreadeth them out as a tent to dwell in. Let's see here, Isaiah 40, verse 22. I'm going to look that one up. Some of the things, and the reason that I'm looking I have a few of these just kind of sitting there, and I'm looking these things up just for the sake of context. Okay, so let's go back to this one, Isaiah. Let's go back to Job's one that people like to quote. Um, where is it? Ba-dum, 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 ba-dum. Where is it? Where did I put it? Job. Oh. Um. Job. Where were you? So Isaiah 40 verse 22. Let's find it in here. He sits enthroned above the circle of the earth, and its people are like grasshoppers. Okay. So let's get some context here for this. Okay. Section here, the translators noted it's comfort for God's people. So I'm just going to take a minute and just read this here. Comfort, comfort my people, says your God. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem and proclaim to her that her hard service has been completed, that her sin has been paid for, that she has received from the Lord's hand double for all her sins. A voice of one calling, in the wilderness prepare the way for the Lord, make straight in the desert a highway for our God. Every valley shall be raised up, every mountain and hill made low. The rough ground shall become level, the rugged places a plain, and the glory of the Lord will be revealed, and all people will see it together, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken. Voice says, cry out, and I say, what shall I cry? All people are like grass, and all of their faithfulness is like the flowers of the field. The grass withers and the flowers fall, because the breath of the Lord blows on them. Surely the people are grass, and the grass withers and the flowers fall, but the word of our God endures forever. Does the breath of God actually blow on the earth? Don't know. But maybe that could be a biblical pull quote for determining where the wind comes from, right? I'm being a little bit, I'm being halfway serious. That's obviously an image. Um, it's basically saying just the mere breath of God, destroys destroys people. Okay, continuing. You who bring good news to Zion, go up to a high mountain. You who bring good news to Jerusalem, lift up your voice with a shout. Lift it up, do not be afraid. Say to the towns of Judah, here is your God. See, the sovereign Lord comes with power, and he rules with a mighty arm. See, his reward is with him, and his recompense accompanies him. I'm going to skip a few here. Who has measured the waters in the hollow of his hand, or with the breadth of his hand marked off the heavens? Who has held the dust of the earth in a basket, or weighed the mountains on the scales and the hills in a balance? Who can fathom the Spirit of the Lord, or instruct the Lord as his counselor? Whom did the Lord consult to enlighten him, and who taught him the right way? Who was it that taught him knowledge, or showed him the path of understanding? Surely the nations are like a drop in a bucket. They are regarded as dust on the scales. He weighs the islands as though they were fine dust. Lebanon is not sufficient for altar fires, nor its animals enough for burnt offerings. Before him all the nations are as nothing, and they are regarded by him as worthless and less than nothing. With whom then will you compare God? To what image will you liken him? As for an idol, a metal worker casts it, and a goldsmith overlays it with gold and fashions silver chains for it. A person too poor to present such an offering selects wood that will rot. They look for a skilled worker to set up an idol that will not topple. Do you not know? Have you not heard? Has it not been told to you from the beginning? Have you not understood since the earth was founded? He sits enthroned above the circle of the earth, and its people are like grasshoppers. He stretches out the heavens like a canopy and spreads them out in a tent to live in. He brings princes to naught and reduces the rulers of the world to nothing. No sooner are they planted, no sooner are they sown, no sooner do they take root in the ground, than he blows on them and they wither, and a whirlwind sweeps them away like chaff. To whom will you compare me? Or who is my equal, says the Holy One. Lift up your eyes and look at the heavens. Who created all these? He who brings out the starry host one by one and calls forth each one of them by name. Because of his great power and mighty strength, not one of them is missing. So, it's really easy. The full context there is just, Isaiah he's offering sort of it's like a contrast and compare sort of thing. It's a lot of imagery there, showing how great God is in comparison to things that we think are great. And so, he sits enthroned above the circle of the earth, and its people are like grasshoppers. Are we literally the size of grasshoppers from God's perspective? He's probably got to be, I've been on top of the Empire State Building when I was younger. People look like ants from that far up. So is heaven further down than the Empire State Building? you know, there's. I'm going to go on to another one here. Let's see here. This is one of my favorite passages in the Bible, Job 38. Okay, so then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, "Who is this who obscures my counsel by words without knowledge? Now brace yourself like a man. I will question you, and you shall inform me. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who fixed its measurements? Surely you know. Or who stretched a measuring line across it? On what were its foundations laid? Or who set its core in place? While the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy. Who enclosed the sea behind doors when it burst forth from the womb? When I made the clouds its garment, and thick darkness its blanket, when I fixed its boundaries and set in place its bars and doors, and I declared, you may come thus far, but no farther. Here your proud waves must stop. In your days you have commanded the morning. In your days have you commanded the morning, or assigned the dawn its place, that it might spread to the ends of the earth and shake the wicked out of it? The earth takes shape like clay under a seal. Its hills stand out like the folds of a garment. Light is withheld from the wicked, and their upraised arm is broken. Have you journeyed to the vents of the sea, or walked in the trenches of deep? Have the gates of death been revealed to you? Have you seen the gates of the shadow of death? Have you surveyed the extent of the earth? Tell me if you know all this. And it's basically, is God giving Job a geography lesson, or is he asking him questions that he possibly can't answer? The audacity of science is that we can answer these questions now. But, we don't even know what the core of the earth is like. We don't know. Okay, deepest hole ever drilled. Yeah, it's okay, Jerome. You can always go back and listen, buddy. It's no big deal. So, it was just, when God questioned Job in Job 38, was he giving him a geography lesson, or was he asking him questions that he couldn't possibly know the answers to? And I just kind of made the point that we don't even know how thick the Earth's crust is. The Kola super deep borehole is the deepest hole that has ever been dug. Ever. 40,000 feet. 7.6 miles deep. And there was still rock. I think it got really hot down there. Um, but this is literally the deepest that we've ever been through the Earth's crust. And it was, here's a picture of it. It's a borehole. It's not even a chasm. It's just a hole that they put a drill bit through. So when science tells us, excuse me. So when science gives us this, it's a bunch of BS. You know, we don't know. Let me find a better picture here. You know, we've been, less than the thickness of the tip of this pointer deep. Actually, that's not true. They theorize that this, see how thick this is right here, that we've been a third of the way through it, right there. But they don't actually know how thick that is. Kind of, it makes you wonder, well, if they don't even have this right, and they say, well, it has to be this way because there's the electromagnetic field and blah, 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 blue, physics, science, it's all equations. Doesn't, doesn't, it's not reality. The truth is that we don't know. So, now, stepping away from what the Bible says, I know I didn't cover very many of these passages, right? And there's a point to that. Let's go to Revelation here, last book of the Bible. Revelation 13, verse 8. All inhabitants of the earth will worship the beast, all whose names have not been written in the Lamb's book of life, the Lamb who was slain from the creation of the world. Some translations say, let's see here, English Standard Version. And all who dwell on earth will worship it, everyone whose name has not been written before the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb who was slain. Let's see here, New American Standard Bible. This is the one. This is the version that I typically read because it's the most. It's the most true to the original translation. So all who dwell on the earth will worship him, everyone whose name has not been written from the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb who has been slain. So, was there a literal book? Is there a literal book at the literal foundation of the earth with names written on it? No. This is the book of this is Revelation. It's imagery. It's a vision. So when going through these passages alone are not a proof of the shape of the earth. And I don't think that they ever can be. The Bible isn't a book of science. A lot of people try to make it that because we have it in our heads as part of this age, this age of humankind, that science is the measure of all things. Excuse me, I'm just checking how long we've been going here. It's all good. So, and I wanted to kind of transition here. I was going to go, let's see here. Oh. So, while the Bible may not, I don't think that the Bible itself can be proof, the words in the Bible can be used to prove the shape of the earth. or biblical cosmology, or the real cosmology. That being said, I'm going to show you a few different cosmologies from different peoples around the world. This is Nordic cosmology. Okay. This is Hindu cosmology. This is Greek cosmology. That looks familiar. Serpent, Adam and Eve, and a tree. This is Hebrew cosmology. Also Hebrew cosmology. This is a projection map. Map of flat Earth. Graphical rendition of flat Earth. A square and stationary Earth. This was, I forget when this was published. 1893. Orlando Ferguson. So, it's not like this is a new idea. This is a very old idea. And the reason that this idea exists is because of our point of observation of the universe. From our perspective, the Earth is stationary. From our perspective, everything moves around the Earth. The sun, moon, and stars move around the Earth, not the other way around. Okay? And this was everybody's perspective for a long, long time, even up till the 18th century. The 21st, the 19th century. Right? So it's not like this is a crazy idea that crazy people have come up with. This is what people thought of the actual shape of things, and it was woven into their religions, into their traditions, and it's to a very large degree it's a valid interpretation of our observations. Does that mean that it's actually how it is? No. No more than no more than this is. So, I'm saying all these things. What's the point? No, one more thing, and then we'll go on. So, one of the other sources that Christian flat Earth people tend to use is the Book of Enoch. The Book of Enoch was not discovered until I believe the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered. It was an intact book. It's I don't think it was part of the original Bible. It was lost for a long time, and it's basically, in Genesis we know that Enoch walked with God and then he was no more. God kind of just whisked him away. So here we have, and this is a famous wood carving print where Enoch, God gave him a look behind the scenes, so to speak, so he could see the workings of the universe. And a lot of people use the Book of Enoch as this is actually where God shows someone, and someone took the time to write down the mechanical workings of the universe. Now, whether or not we can trust it as a divinely inspired book, or merely a historical perspective piece, that some sort of an allegory or what have you, don't know. there, as far as I know, there's nothing in there about Jesus or salvation or what have you. I've never read it. It's kind of on my list of things to do eventually, but it's not something that I'm going to put too horribly much stock in compared to, say, John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his only son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life. Yeah, a lot of people haven't read the book. You know, it's just, it is what it is. As I said, it's fairly new in the grand scheme of things. Um, from my perspective as a Lutheran, Martin Luther didn't translate it in the Bible, so it's not part of it. And that's a terrible joke. Um, but, anyways. So, I'm going to get rid of some of this stuff here. I don't necessarily even recommend reading the Book of Enoch. I mean, if you want to, go for it, but just bear in mind that who knows if it's legitimate or not. I don't think there's a way to tell. Alright. So, let's get into, I was going to talk about the firmament, but a little bit. So this word firmament, it means a vault or expanse of the heavens, i.e. the sky. Foundation, support, basis. The sky or heavens, the vault of heaven, viewed as something solid and abiding, the region of the air. The firmament, based on this definition, the firmament could just be the degrading, the atmosphere that degrades into nothing, and eventually no technology works beyond it. You know, um, what is it? How high is the ISS? I don't believe the ISS is real either, based on their clown show of. If you want to look up something fun, look up ISS bloopers on YouTube. There's compilations of people in wire harnesses dancing in front of green screens. It's really pathetic. Alright, ISS maintains an orbit of average altitude of 400 kilometers by means of reboost maneuvers using the engines on the module or visiting spacecraft. It circles the Earth in roughly 92 minutes and completes 15.5 orbits per day. That's what they tell us. Try to look up and find a video of Earth rotating. It doesn't exist. The best that they have is a time lapse photos, 25 hours, so you can see a full rotation. And I suppose if you have to take them from the space station, it's circling the Earth every 92 minutes. So, I don't know. Maybe they stitched together those pictures too. I'm not sure what stationary place they took the still shots from for that time lapse compilation. But anyways, the firmament doesn't necessarily have to be a solid thing. It can just be a region of air, a vault or expanse. No, I don't think it's an Area 51. There's actually, look at, some people actually think that the set is at like one of the, is like in Houston or something like that. I forget, or Cape Canaveral, or it's either in Houston or Florida. There's like a video of like someone, or pictures of like someone visiting, and you see this astronaut in front of a green screen with like these marker balls. I don't. You'd have to look for it. But there's just a photo of it, and then later next to it, there's a photo of that same astronaut like doing an ISS broadcast. It's kind of funny. Um, you know, ISS could be one of those high altitude planes that they can fake zero gravity in. Um, you know. Oh, let's see here. What else we got here? Firmament. So I wanted to get into the part that I think is the most important part. We could talk about NASA and their silliness all day. Yes, the orbit is an hour and a half, but the rotation it takes. Yeah, right. No, it's the time lapse is it's pictures. It's 25 pictures that show 25 hours of rotation. Sorry, I wasn't clear about that. And so it's like, it's not just 24 hours, it's 25 hours, so that you can't say they just put it on a loop or something like that. But if you look at it, it's kind of funny. The clouds don't move. Um, and so it's, the Earth spins, but the clouds don't move. It's really actually quite funny. I mean, they move by the time it spins around one revolution, but yeah. Anyways, um, let's see here. But the real thing, the real important thing here, and this is kind of what, if you've listened to some of Owen's streams on it, the real thing is that this whole idea, this whole notion of space, this whole notion of, yeah, it's no big deal, man. Um, it is all too tricky. Your point does still stand. It's all too tricky. I mean, it's just, why not? Why don't they have, an HD video? They orbit the Earth in 92 minutes. You know, they go around it 15 times a day. I don't know. Have some video. It doesn't seem like it'd be too hard. Not to mention the other satellites that are in orbit, supposed satellites. All right, now that I mentioned that, it's let's see here. Picture of satellite. Come on now. All right. If you look up pictures of satellites, you are never going to see a picture of an actual satellite in space. It's all artists' renditions. It's all CGI. Oh, Shutterstock. Okay, well, look at this one. Does that look like Photoshop to you? Kind of does to me. All those angles look way too crisp. What else we got here? Yeah, it doesn't look real. It's supposed to be Sputnik. Excuse me. Yeah, I know you do. I'm just speaking generically, for anyone else who might be listening or will listen. Yeah, and all the pictures are CGI. Yeah, exactly. So, we don't even have an actual picture of an actual satellite that they've supposedly launched into space. That's a little odd. All right, so let's get down to the nub of this. Okay, so Owen, he's mentioned that the whole idea of space, it's a gigantic psychological operation. Okay, where it simultaneously lifts your attention away from the Earth and directs it towards nothingness. Oh yeah, the ones that are actual photos never of the satellites orbiting. Yeah. Well, I would dare you to find an actual picture of a satellite first. Um, I don't know if they exist. Maybe on NASA's website they have a picture of one in like a warehouse or something like that. I don't know. I haven't really looked there. But the whole point of space is it's like the ultimate psychological operation to get people to lift their eyes up, but not to God, to lift their eyes up to their own imagination, to project that imagination out into infinite possibility that's infinite nothingness at the same time. And that really messes with people. Add to that like the entire generational, the feeling of generational accomplishment by all the baby boomer generation. Oh, we went to the moon. Um, we got to the moon. What have we done? I can't believe how many times I've heard, well, we went to the moon 9 times in 5 years. We haven't been back since. What's wrong with us? We've degraded so much. It's like, yeah, I guess, or maybe we never went. But Owen's point of how your thoughts are shaped, that's similar to, and I've mentioned him before here, Jonathan Peugeot. I'm going to play a little bit of a clip here. This is a full frontal attack on the Copernican revolution. Here he just got done talking about um, alienation, how our society as it is currently, there's all kinds of alienation. I'm hoping to not get an echo. If there isn't, if there develops, and I'm gonna mute my mic while I do this, so that there is no echo. In science, our gods, in science, our gods' words lost don't replace God's knowledge of their own. Is what their goal is. Yes, exactly. Um, yeah, no, true. Yeah, science it's a feeble attempt to replace God, but it wouldn't have been science wouldn't have been possible without Christianity. But unfortunately, Satan corrupts everything. So, but anyways, um, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to play this little clip here. He just got done talking about alienation. I'll let it run for a few minutes. But he talks about sort of that shift of mentality that happened with Copernicus. So without further ado, here we go. Whoops. I guess I don't know how to get audio. Let's see here. Hold up. Hmm. Let's do.
So too the entire cosmos was built concentrically.
Is that better?
So too.
Jerome, I'm looking to you, buddy. Okay, good. All right, I'm just going to back it up a little bit then, and sorry for the delay. I'm going to back it up a little bit then, and we'll try again.
This is a form of alienation. This is an image of alienation, of being ripped away from whatever it is that can bring us together, whatever it is that can give us common reason, common identity, common purpose. That is alienation. And alienation has been a common theme in modernity. Even the people who were for modernism, who were pushing modernity, could notice it happening. You see commentators in the existentialists and people like that who talk constantly about modern man's alienation. They know that it's happening. And the suburban sprawl is the last phase of alienation. But there is a more profound, there is a more original alienation, which is at the core of all of this. And we can see it in terms of space as well. We can see it in terms of space. And this is where I'm going to take on the last 500 years of intellectual history.
So I just wanted to pause here real quick and just say, if Jonathan, if it gets back that we played your video, I'm really a big fan, and I just, don't copyright strike this because this is really important information to get out there. Right, let's continue on. Has to be transformative for fair use, so, gotta pause it once in a while.
Just like a town was built concentrically, so too the entire cosmos was built concentrically. So too, Earth, man looked up at the heavens and saw the spheres moving in the heavens and interpreted them that way, saw them as moving around this center of meaning, which is man created in the image of God. That is how the world was built. And so the Copernican revolution is a testimony to the very, very deep change that happened at that time. We often miss what that change was about. We're often presented with the Copernican revolution as this notion that people used to mistakenly believe that the sun, revolved around the earth. And now we know, technically, that that is not the case, that in fact the earth revolves around the sun. But that is not really what the Copernican revolution is about. It was really about a move away from this enchanted, centered experience. It was a move away from seeing meaning as the organizing principle of the universe, of seeing this notion of center not only in terms of mechanical movement, but in terms of centers of meaning, centers of identity, as being the way that we look at the world and the way we calculate the world. And I know this one is, it might be difficult to grasp. I was actually expecting maybe a few people to get up and get out after I said that, but luckily that hasn't happened yet. You see, in order to even perceive, right, that the possibility of the earth turning around the sun, the change had to have already happened. There had been a very profound change in the way we see the world for that to be even possible to be posited. Because in order to be able to calculate that, right, Copernicus and Galileo had to alienate themselves. They had to alienate themselves. They had to project their mind to some imaginary point out there in space, and then imagine in their imagination at how these spheres were moving. It was a profound gesture of alienation. And it's important to talk about the Copernican revolution. Why is it so important? It's so important because people keep talking about it today. People are always talking about it. It is one of the founding myths of the modern world is the Copernican revolution. We hear materialist scientific types bring it up all the time as an example of a moment where religion was obscure and science was bright. We see it all the time. That's how it's presented to us. The truth is that there is absolutely nothing obvious. There is absolutely nothing obvious that change would happen. And that might seem strange to say, but I can show it to you quite easily. Because for some reason we've stopped there. For some reason we've stopped at a point where we say the earth is revolving around the sun. But that's not the end of it, is it? Right? That's not the end of that movement. We've moved quite further than that. In fact, with Einstein and general relativity, we have been told that all motion is based on points of reference. So it's not true that just that the earth is turning around the sun, right? So the earth is turning around the sun, and then the sun is turning around in the galaxy, and then the galaxy is moving away from other galaxies, and then the stars are all moving away from all the other stars. So let's try to figure that movement out in our minds now. But in order to, so we don't go there. We don't go there because once we get to the point that if we're going to calculate things only in terms of mechanical causation and mechanical movement, we should have to take up all these movements at the same time and also realize that the earth is turning around the sun relative to the sun, and the sun is moving away from the other stars relative to each other. Right? They're not actually moving in themselves. They're only moving in relationship to other things. That's Einstein's theory. That's general relativity.
Okay, I'm just going to leave it right there for now. If anyone wants to just go ahead and I've left that up. Full Frontal Attack on the Copernican Revolution. It's a really good listen, and I highly recommend it. So, if I can distill down to a nubbin what I've taken away from that, and just kind of bringing everything that I've already mentioned to a nubbin, it doesn't actually matter what the shape of the Earth is. It doesn't actually matter what the stars are, where the stars are, any of that stuff. It doesn't matter. What matters is our relationship to God. And so, if you want to, this is kind of hokey, but this is kind of what I learned in grade school. Because when we were talking about the solar system and stuff like that, I went to a Christian day school. Yeah, he's a very smart guy, and I really, really appreciate him. I appreciate his channel, and you should, everyone who listens to this should go check out Jonathan Peugeot's channel. He is he's an Orthodox Christian. He is an icon carver, and he's an expert on symbolism, medieval symbolism, artistic symbolism, and I think that he's worth. You can't ignore the symbolism behind things because it's part of how the world works. And I know that probably doesn't make any sense, but go watch his stuff for a while and it will begin to. So, when I was in grade school, one of the things that we were taught is like, okay, well, this is my teacher just trying to bring it back around to the Bible and to Christianity, and it's just like, well, the sun is the center of the universe. The Son of God, S-O-N, not the S-U-N. And we revolve around the sun. So, even if Copernicus was right, which I'm not sure that he is, everything that he came up with was just equations. There's no way, because of the problem of points of reference, we absolutely have no way of knowing what the shape of any of this is, unless we can somehow go out into space and see it, which I don't believe is possible. So there we are back to that. But even if Copernicus was right, then say the Earth moves and it's a spinning ball and it revolves around the sun and all of this other stuff, let's just take that as given. Does that honestly affect the gospel in any way, shape, or form? And the answer is no. If the Earth and cosmology and it all turns out to be that it is that everything is that it's actually like this, is that more affirming of God? Absolutely it is. This is a direct relationship to God, but it doesn't actually have to be. This doesn't physically have to exist like this for the symbolism to still be true. Which brings us back to the thing that I kind of mentioned at the beginning, is that people didn't think of truth in the same ways. Whatever is true affects your life for the positive. The, you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free, from Jesus himself. Jesus himself said that, not truth sets you free from Jesus. That's ridiculous. But it doesn't actually matter what the shape of the earth is. What matters is what's your relationship with God. If thinking about the universe like this brings you closer to God, so be it. If thinking about the universe like this brings you closer to God, so be it. The actual shape of it doesn't matter. It's like the difference between rhetoric and dialectic. This is what Vox Day talks about. Rhetoric has no information, but it points you to, good rhetoric has no information, but it points you to the truth. Dialectic is all information. Don't get hung up with dialectic cosmology. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't affect the gospel in any way, shape, or form. The rhetorical does, though, which is why in Isaiah, and I took away that, it says God, he sits on the circle of the earth and wears grasshoppers. The earth is his footstool, and the firmament's his footstool. Okay, great. That all that's telling us is that God's right there. He can see us. He's not far off. Let me look up that passage. Acts 17, verse 27. Let's see here. God intended. Well, let's see here. Um, let's start with verse 24. Acts 17, verse 24. The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth, and does not live in temples made by human hands. Nor is he served by human hands as if he needed anything, because he himself gives all men life and breath and everything else. From one man he made every nation of men to inhabit the whole earth, and he determined their appointed times and the boundaries of their lands. God intended that they would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from each one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being, as some of your own poets have said. We are his offspring. Therefore, being offspring of God, we should not think that the divine being is like gold or silver or stone, an image formed by man's skill and imagination. God's not far from any one of us. And that's the important thing That's the important thing to take away from this. Um, is he physically close? No, probably not. He is in heaven because that is where God is. The heavens. That's in the spiritual realm. If you want, if you kind of want to go down a bit of a mind trippy uh, uh, sort of rabbit hole here, look up. Here we go. Carolyn and Lauren. Carolyn Hamlet. She's an interesting. She's an interesting gal. She's a former Illuminati, and she was a victim of satanic ritual abuse. Um, and she's done a few interviews, especially with oh shoot, I forget the guy's name. He's a flat Earth guy as well. Oh, uh, yeah, here we go. I'm not gonna play this. Um, let's see here. He's with Truth Frequency Radio, Revolutionary Radio with Daniel Duval. Um, let's see here. Let's see here. What else? What else? What else? Um, I would say that when listening to those, bear in mind that Daniel Duval he's essentially practicing witchcraft. So just take everything he says with a grain of salt. Um, and Carolyn Hamlet eventually distanced herself from him because she recognized that he was doing some of the same things that the Illuminati does when they're conditioning victims. Um, One of the things, and this is how my brain works. Um, you know, Owen mentioned, I mean, this is like, 6 months ago, just something that he just mentioned offhandedly that made me think of Carolyn, was that, in the circles of, Satanists and such, Luciferians and what have you, they have a belief that the sexual abuse of children creates psychic powers. Then they're called the Shining Ones, which is what was based on the movie The Shining was based on, was that kid was being sexually abused by his father, and that's why he developed telepathy. Um, let's see here. So, anyways, but Carolyn Hamlet is proof, is at least from her own testimony, that yeah, that sort of ritual abuse actually does create. It does in some instances give people the ability to do things that are supernatural. But she talks about how she used to some missions she'd go on, and they'd use things like these like teleporters to get to different planets and stuff like that. Well, what we'd consider to be planets, but her interviews remind me that reality is multidimensional, and the place where God is, we can't get to. Now, whether or not it's a physical limitation, it's an actual physical limitation like a barrier or firmament, or if it's a pan-dimensional limitation like we can't cross into that realm. you know, does it doesn't really matter which one it is. So is the firmament a piece of a piece of God glass in the sky, or is it a dimensional barrier that we can't cross? And maybe we can just keep going up and up and up and up and up, and we'll run into nothingness. It'll be like, in a video game where you can run off the edge of the screen forever, but then you turn back the other way and you just pop out the other side of the screen. Um, Let's see here. Jerome said, "For God distance is no obstacle, for it was his hands that separated the waters and spoke the words that made all things into being. It's our job to know that he is close and we are in his hands." Absolutely. Um, God, I said, a couple of the things I quoted at the beginning, God's wisdom is foolishness, man's wisdom is foolishness to God. Um, we cannot, anything that we think we can use, be it logic or science or what have you, to put God into a box is insufficient to even begin to describe it. He does not operate, he's not part of creation, he does not operate with the rules of creation. He operates by his own logic, he operates by his own physics. he he does what he wants to. And we aren't going to be able to understand that until we get to the next life in heaven. Uh, after this life is over, for those who believe in him, who believe in Jesus Christ as their Savior. Um, but Carolyn Hamlet, very interesting. It's like a 4-part YouTube interview, and it's really creepy. But she talks about different dimensions, and she talks about how she spent she spent one summer vacation in Atlantis underwater or something like that, and talks about how she had different bodies and things like this, and it's just like, well, I'm not sure how much of that is just hallucinations or what have you, or if she's you know these are legitimate experiences and not just horrible nightmares that she had because of the trauma that she experienced. um, I'll leave that to anyone who wants to look into that, decide for themselves. I'm not going to try to color it in any way, but definitely her testimony lends a different perspective on what we would think of as space and the universe and Earth. Um, so getting back to, can we look at the Bible? Can we look at the Bible as when it talks about the shape of the Earth and stuff like that, and different aspects of the Earth? Can we take that as gospel fact, like we could go out and measure it with a ruler? I'm not sure that's the case. Um, it's two different ways of interpreting the Bible. There's literal interpretation, so we'll get to the definition of literal here. Confirming or limited to the simplest, non-figurative, or most obvious meaning of a word or words. Avoiding exaggeration, metaphor, or embellishment. So just taking things as written, as them saying what they mean. And then there's literary, of relating to or dealing with literature, relating to writers of the professional literature, versed in or fond of literature or learning. So literature, there's different types of literature. Literature's typically, you know, poems, fiction, but it could also be history. It can also be, it's just, what genre of writing do you have? And in the Bible, you have many different types. Psalms is all poems, Revelation, Ezekiel, parts of Daniel, those are all revelation. They're visions. They're images. These people, they received images from God that they try to translate into human words, which is impossible to do. So they use imagery. They use a literary device, and we would to take some of those things literally would be a mistake. I think that the method that has been lost on us, and this is why I showed Jonathan Peugeot, is the symbolic interpretation of things. Now, don't think of a symbol as a metaphor, because it's not. A symbol is an image, it's an icon of an idea or collection of ideas, um, that's um, where you can just present the symbol and it gives you a whole bunch of information without giving you that information directly. Think of it as, I like to think of it as a combination of, it's a combination of rhetoric and dialectic. Um, the image itself is the rhetoric, and then it carries with it a whole bunch of dialectic baggage, so to speak. Excuse me a second. Getting over a little bit of a sore throat here. Um, so just as an example, and Jonathan Peugeot uses this one, it's like the symbol of water. Water is a symbol for chaos. And so crossing over water is a symbol for change. Because you're traveling through chaos, you're sort of traveling through chaos, and it's a transition. So that's one example I think is just the best and easiest one to grasp. So if you want to know a little bit more about this, Jonathan Peugeot again has a good video, Symbolic versus Literal Interpretation of the Bible, where he does a little bit better job of explaining this than I can. I mean, I could if I watched it again a couple times, tried to remember a few more key points, but that'll straighten it out for you here. And also, let's see here, what is symbolism with Mathieu Peugeot? That's Jonathan's brother. Um, and Mathieu, he has written a book. I own this book, The Language of Creation, Cosmic Symbolism in Genesis. It's a commentary. I recommend picking up this book. I started to read it, and then I got distracted with a different book, and so I'm going to restart it and reread it over again. But it says, you know, there's this, when real life happens, symbols emerge, and you cannot ignore that when dealing with the Bible, because symbolism is a part of reality, and it doesn't fit into the category of literal or literary. It's not a literal. It's not necessarily literal, although it points to the truth. Um, I know that that's kind of rambly, and I probably botched that horribly. But yeah, that's about all I have. And so when you're looking at these when you're trying to, as good Christians, we ought to look to the Bible first for what is true. But we have to remember the Bible is not a book of science. It was never intended to be a book of science. It is at its heart, a book full of supernatural events that culminate in God coming to earth as a human being to sacrifice himself for the sins of mankind, past, present, and future. You can't quantify that with science. It's a mistake to look at that as some sort of, although it took place in reality and it took place on earth, it's a mistake to treat it as just a series of facts. You're gonna end up getting lost in the weeds very, very quickly if you're going to approach the Bible as though it's just a series of facts. And a lot of this, if you go back and watch the video, where Jonathan Peugeot talks about the Copernican revolution and stuff like that, that I showed the clip of, um, he'll explain it to you a bit better, and he kind of comes to the same conclusion that it doesn't really matter what the actual scientific fact is. What matters more is our perspective, which sounds kind of wishy-washy, but it's like your perspective in how you experience things. That's what's important. And so, at the end of this all, Um, I mean, I'm not doing this nearly the justice that it deserves because it's somewhat complicated. But I will reiterate, it doesn't actually matter what the shape of the Earth is. But from our perspective, for all intents and purposes, it is flat. It's flat and everything revolves around us, and God's right there, watching over us. And at the end of the day, it doesn't actually matter if it's round and spinning and flying through the universe. That sort of information is a distraction from the truth of God and God's saving grace. So, this probably wasn't Jerome. I hope you're not disappointed. This probably isn't where you thought this was going to go when when I agreed to do this topic. But I would just encourage you and anyone else that was listening, don't get hung up on the facts. What does your experience tell you? What does your perception based on that experience tell you, and how does it relate to God's plan of salvation? Use those three things. Use those three things as touch points to point you in the direction of the truth. And it's fun to go off about how we never went to the moon and people actually believe that. Um, it's fun to think about the shape of the Earth, but yeah, I said before, I'm saying it doesn't actually matter. What matters is your relationship to God. Oh, I'm glad it wasn't disappointed at all. Learn something new all the time. So, um, I think that's about all I have to say on this subject. We could go into more about flat Earth and we could laugh at a bunch of stuff. But I've left a lot of threads hanging there for people to follow up on um, at their leisure. Um, let's see here. What else? Oh yeah, me and John are planning on streaming again tomorrow, and we're gonna do some. We're gonna because of John's work schedule being so wonky, we're going to pre-record some things. But I think that while he's on this weird schedule, once every couple weeks or so, I'm gonna try to on Instagram. I manage the Instagram account, so I'm gonna try to field requests from Instagram for topics to cover, and I hope to be able to bring it back around to the subject of the original intent of this channel, which is to kind of point people in the direction of the truth and to help people spit themselves out of the system, um, and think for themselves and do the work to preserve themselves and their families, to reconnect with God, and to make a future for our children and grandchildren, and you know, hold continue to and while we're doing that, hold out hope that Jesus comes back soon and puts this whole mess to bed, and we get to experience heaven at that point. What time tomorrow? I'm not sure yet. I'm still trying to work that with John. We will. I will definitely post on Instagram before we go up. Probably a few hours notice, but we're going to be yeah. Not sure what topic we're going to cover tomorrow uh, for live streaming, but I'm sure it'll be something good. Through truth, we can find God. Through truth, we can get real close. I think we can get real close. I mean, unless you're referring to Jesus as the way, the truth, and as referring to Jesus as the truth. Um, yeah, you know, what does Jesus say? I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. So, you know, through see those who are predisposed to seeking the truth will eventually bump into Jesus. Um, if at that point they choose to reject him, that's on them. But and there's that's the that's the choice that God gives everybody. Um, we can we can be confronted with the truth, and then whether or not we reject it is a whole other is a whole other business to attend to. But I think that that's about it for today. Thank you. Wow, let's see how many people we got watching. We had 3 watching, so that's me monitoring and Jerome and one other person. Um, yeah, that's pretty good. I'll take it. Yeah. Have a good night. Take it easy, and we will see you next time.